Hello and welcome to Chat with Kidlit Editor, where we are going to answer some of the questions that you submitted about Kidlit writing and the editorial and publication process. So, my name is Jennifer Navarre. I am a Kidlit editor and book coach, and I also have a background in K-12 education as an elementary ELL teacher and in educational publishing. I'm also a Kidlit writer myself, and I'm working on book 3 of my chapter book series. So let's dig into the questions. So the first one, what is Kidlit? You'll hear different terms from different people. Same person might use lots of the terms. You'll hear Kidlit, children's books, children's literature, different things like that. What we're talking about is we're talking about books for babies all the way up through about 18 years old. So it's not just one type of book. Obviously, you wouldn't give a 2-year-old the same type of book you would give a 16-year-old. So we're talking about board books for those youngest readers. We're talking about picture books, which is a lot of times what people visualize when you say children's books. And then we're also talking about early readers and chapter books, and then middle grade and YA. And yes, even though lots of adults read YA, it is technically part of Kidlit because it is for the 12 to 18-year-olds and people older than that too. So, how long should my picture book be? I have heard multiple agents and acquiring editors at publishing houses say they don't count the words. It's not about how long the story is. It's about, does it feel like the whole story has been told? Does it feel too long? That being said, ideally with traditional publishing, you're looking at 300 to 500 words for your entire book. And self-publishing authors, yes, you can write a longer story. But number one, you're competing against all of those other books that are short, that are that 300 to 500 words. And also, a picture book is meant to be read in one sitting. And if your book is so long that you don't finish it before bedtime, or you don't finish it as a teacher in that allotted time for your read aloud, and you have to come back to it the second day, you've lost the readers, because it should be just a, read it in one sitting type of read. So even for self-publishing, we want to try to cap it around 1,000 words. Less if you could get it, but 1,000 words is usually the cap. Now, if you're writing a nonfiction picture book, you do tend to have a few more words to play with. But even then, even for traditionally published nonfiction, 1,500 words is probably the upper limit of what the book would be. And that's not including back matter, that's just the actual story. My picture book manuscript is meant for older children. What more can I do to convey that in a query letter other than listing the intended age range? So, picture books are usually for about 4 to 8 years old. So, I'm assuming that you're talking about a book maybe for upper elementary, which would be like that 8, 9, 10-year-old range. There's not as many of those published these days. There are some. I would say the two things that come to mind for me are looking at comp titles and presenting those in your query letter. And the comp titles that you should choose would also be for older children. So that gives the agency idea of, oh, well, if they're comping this title and that's for older children, their book must be something along those lines as well. The other idea I have, and this might be just me putting my teacher hat back on, would be that you can look. I'm making some assumptions here because all I have is this question. My assumption is that a picture book manuscript for older children usually has some sort of science or social studies bent to it. It's a biography, it's telling about a scientific discovery, it's telling about a historical event. There's some sort of science or social studies link to your story. If that is the case, I would start looking at the state standards for whatever age you think this is. If you think this is a book for fourth and fifth graders, I would start looking at the fourth and fifth grade science standards or social studies standards, whatever it is that will apply, and try to find something that aligns with your book and then talk about that in your query letter. I wouldn't say in the query letter that this will connect to standard S dot four dot, like don't give like the whole string of like what what the code is of which particular standard it is, like SS dot four dot oops dot oops, like, you know. But you could say that this book would be relevant to fourth grade classrooms as they study XYZ in American history, because fourth grade is when they start to learn about American history or something like that. So those are the things that come to mind. How should I use mentor text to revise a picture book manuscript? So lots of different things you can do. To start with, look at picture books that were published in the last 5 years. And really, 5 years is a hard limit because picture books take longer to be illustrated and be prepared for publication. So a picture book that was released today was probably sold 2 to 3 years ago, and it was written and workshopped and critiqued before that. So definitely look for picture books that are more recently published. You can look at it and study it as far as the length. We talked about word count a few minutes ago. For a picture book, this is something feasible you could do. You could type out the manuscript into a Word doc and just see what it looks like as a Word document without the illustrations, without all of the flourishes that the publisher, put together in this book. What does it look like as just straight text? Where did they choose to put the page breaks? How are the page spreads set up? You can look at the point of view. If it's first person, third person, occasionally you'll see second person point of view. That would be the you point of view. You can look at word choice. You can look at what is being told in the illustrations that is never mentioned in the text. Also, what's told in the illustrations that is just sort of briefly mentioned, but where is it expanded on in the text? Like the setting might have a few words description, but obviously you're seeing much more. Um, are they describing in the text of the story, things like clothing or food or something? Is it more generic there? And then you get much more out of the story in the illustrations. You can also, there's so many things. If it's rhyming, look at the rhyming scheme, look at the meter. How was that done throughout? You can look at the vocabulary, the word choice that is used. Um, See if it's a fiction picture book, see if you can find techniques they use like the rule of three. Look at the beginning and the ending and see, you know, what was it that made you want to run through those first few pages and really hooked you into the story? How is it that the story ends and where it would make a child want to not only finish the book, but go back to the beginning and want to read it again? So those are some different things that you can look at in different books. What are your thoughts on humor in children's books? Well, kids love it. Um, kids love kids love laughing. They laugh a lot more than we do as adults, and they will find humor in lots of things, but they will definitely respond well to humor in children's books. I have heard that it's hard to sell humor. I'm thinking specifically picture books, but then I've never heard of anything that was easy to sell, so take that with a grain of salt. The resources that I have found out there, if you want to study more about humor writing in children's books, there's two places that you can go. Number one, the Writing Barn, which is, I think it's thewritingbarn.com. It's based out of Austin, Texas, but they do everything online nowadays. And they have done in the past what they called a something like a funny women's confab, where it was a 2-day online event with women Kidlit authors who write funny books. And there were There were craft sessions, there were networking sessions, there was all kinds of things. They've held it twice, and I have no insider information. I have like this is just me speculating, but if they've done it twice, that makes me think they might do it again. So I would, if nothing else, just bookmark their website and just check back occasionally for new offerings. Get on their email list so you can find out if slash when they do one of those again. The other resource I can think of is Julie Hedlund, Hedlund, who is the creator of the 12 by 12 picture book challenge. She has a Teachable page where you can purchase different presentations that were done within 12 by 12 in past years. So if you just Google Julie Hedlund Teachable, then you'll be taken to her Teachable page, which is her course creation page. And then you can buy individual sessions if you want to. And just on the first page of her Teachable page alone, there were 3 different courses on humor and bringing the funny into picture books. So those are some resources that could help you in your writing journey. For children's book authors, is it okay to submit queries without a dummy book, i.e. with just the manuscript and concept images? So if you are going to query a picture book to an agent and you are only the author, all that you would submit is the manuscript as a Word document or copy and paste it into Query Manager. You would not even submit concept images. When you query, you would need to also, you would query one manuscript, but you would also need to have a few more manuscripts polished and ready to go so that if an agent likes what they read and they want to have a conversation with you, they want to see more because they're wanting to help you build a career, not just launch this one book. So if they contact you, then you want to have other picture books that are ready to go that you could send them of, oh, here's some more examples of my work. So if you're author only, you're just submitting the manuscript, no concept images, no dummy, no, don't submit the Word document as 32 different pages with, 1 or 2 sentences on each page in the Word doc. Just it's all, just all straight down the Word document. Your Word doc will probably be like 2 or 3 pages. That's it. Now, if you are an author and an illustrator and you're querying, then we're talking different rules. So you would be submitting your manuscript, and then you might, depending on whatever the agent specifications are, you might be submitting a dummy or a link to your portfolio or something like that, if they're wanting to potentially sign you as an author and as an illustrator. I am a neurodivergent writer writing neurodivergent picture books. I am struggling to convince publishers' marketing teams to go forward. Any suggestions on how to best package a neurodivergent manuscript to help get it through acquisitions? So, my first thought is I'm sorry that you're struggling with this. I think this is a conversation that's probably, I think this is something that's probably happening to lots of people, but maybe not everybody's speaking up about it. My first thought is, do you have an agent? Because the agent should be leading these conversations. My guess is that you don't. I'm just throwing that out there. First of all, if you have an agent, you should be talking to that agent. They should be leading the charge on this with the marketing teams and all of that. And they should be able to talk with other agents in their agency to try to brainstorm and figure this out. If you are not agented and so therefore it is all on you, you have contacted publishers directly and are seeking representation, then my suggestion would be to see if you can find some comp titles of neurodivergent picture books or chapter books or middle grade and try to contact those authors and see what they did or what their agents did. Um, there is a push for neurodivergent rep in Kidlit, but it seems like it's still a small community, and it seems like, and generally, the authors want to help each other out. Um, Not asking them to give, like give away secrets and things that they can't, and reveal private conversations and things like that. But they might be the ones who would give you some suggestions on what to do, how to position it, because it's, the marketing team, the marketing teams want to know how to how to how to make this sellable. And of course it is sellable, but it's just a matter of convincing the marketing teams. You might also, even if you don't contact these authors, you might, find these comp titles and look up their Amazon page. What does their Amazon A plus content look like? What does their website look like? What does their Instagram or TikTok or whatever look like? What is it that they're doing marketing wise? So therefore, what is it that you could replicate? How is it that you could advocate? Um, think about, are there organizations or publications that you could pitch to market your book? What is it that you bring to the table as the author, as a representative of the community? And I mean, I know this isn't just one answer, but I'm just trying to throw out ideas, and hopefully that something there will give you an idea or be a direction that you can go forward with. How or where do I find graded word lists? I want to challenge but not overwhelm children with vocabulary. That image is the answer to your question. Writer's Digest put out a book. I think this is from like 2005, 2015, one of those. It's several years old, but it's it's still good. Children's Writers Word Book. This is the second edition, and it just breaks down words by grade level. And so it is helpful because on the one hand, with picture books, because adults are reading the book to the child, you can put in vocabulary that will challenge the reader. Then once they start reading independently with the early readers and chapter books and on, there's that line between, can they actually sound it out and read it, and then will they know what it is? And so this book is a good resource for that. Another resource, if you want to just look at your manuscript or a chapter just as one section of your text, is if you Google Accelerated Reader Atos, ATOS, and Accelerated Reader has done, they have created a resource on their website where you can input your text. They're not saving it, they're not tracking it, I promise. Um, and then it can check the readability, and it will check the overall readability score by grade level. But it will also break down what is the average sentence length for this passage that you submitted. What is the average word length? How many letters are in each word? And that can give you some ideas as well. What types of errors do you see most often? So I wouldn't call them errors. I work with self-publishing authors. I also work with authors who are going to query and work to become traditionally published authors. I primarily offer coaching and the big picture editing, so developmental editing and manuscript critiques. That's what a lot of what I do is. And then I also still offer some line and copy editing and occasionally proofreading. So I do see, different books at different stages of the process. Um, I wouldn't call them errors, but I would say that there are things that I notice. One is that there are some authors who choose to get their book illustrated before they have their book edited, and they're going to self-publish. And this can cause a lot of problems because often what happens in the editing process, and I'm talking about the big picture editing especially, is that the story will change. But they've already paid for these page spreads, and now the page spreads don't match the story. And so they have to go back to their illustrator, they have to get back on the illustrator's calendar, and they have to pay for more illustrations. So that's one thing that I see. Another thing that I see is a lot of times, not a lot of times, but sometimes, authors are not very clear on the different categories of Kidlit, and they aren't sure of what the market expectations are for that type of book. For example, a picture book that is 6,000 words, or a chapter book written on a seventh grade reading level. Chapter books are for much younger readers than that. So things like that where they haven't examined the market and what Kidlit is and seen, does my book actually align with the expectations for this category of book. So those are two things. Um, Everybody makes spelling errors and grammar errors and things like that, and that's what editors are for. Everybody needs a second set of eyes or a third set of eyes. Um, Editors hire editors as well. But I would say, as far as the story, it's knowing your audience, knowing the expectations, doing things in the right order, because that's just going to make life easier for you, and it's going to make your book stronger in the long run. So this question kind of goes hand in hand with that. What do you wish more authors would do when they write a book? So again, know the market, know what's expected. Read books that are currently that were recently published. We all have our favorites from when we were growing up, or when we were raising children, or when we were teaching, or when we were, insert whatever here. And that's fine that we have those favorites and that we reread those. But there's also lots and lots of books that were published last year. And I'm not saying you have to read all of them, but if you're going to write picture books, you should be reading picture books that were recently published. Chapter books, middle grade, same thing. If you're going to be writing lyrical picture books, then you need to be reading a lot of lyrical. If you're going to be writing rhyming, then yes, you get the idea. Um, knowing what's out there, um, getting other eyes on your work before you query or before you contact an editor. It's amazing how many people will contact me for editing and nobody has read their book before, or it's just been their spouse or their best friend, if that. Um, you you think all of your words are perfect. I think all the words that I write are perfect too. But you need other people's eyes, other people's perspectives, and not just the immediate circle in your life, not just your partner, your children, your best friend, your neighbor, your friend who's an English teacher. You need to connect with other writers who are writing for your audience or a similar audience. If they write middle grade and you write picture books, a lot of times with Kidlit, you don't just write one category, you write more than one. So, that might work out. Um, but you need to have other writers look at your writing. And I'm as guilty of this as anybody else. Um, I have to find a new critique group of my own because mine kind of fell by the wayside. So those things, I mean, they're universal. They're things that no matter if you're a new writer or somebody who's been writing for a while, those are things that I would recommend. I want to write for the younger middle grade age group, 6 to 10. So shorter chapter books or early readers. How should I get started? So this 6 to 10-year-old age group is really interesting to me as somebody who writes for this age group, as somebody who used to teach this age group, because in those few short years, you have a multitude of reading abilities. And this is where in the Kidlit categories, if we thought of them as a continuum, starting with board books and going all the way over to YA, This is where it all gets muddled because some 6-year-olds are ready for chapter books and some 10-year-olds are still at early readers. And it's all very child specific. So in this question, there were actually 3 categories of Kidlit mentioned: middle grade and chapter books and early readers. And all 3 of those are read by some portion of that age group. So that does make sense that why this person is asking. However, what you would be writing would just be one of those types of Kidlit. So I'm going to start with the younger and work my way up. Early readers are those very, very first books that kids read on their own. They're still usually 32 pages, sometimes 64. Think of the Mo Willems Elephant and Piggy books as a longer 64-page kind of early reader. Early readers are still very big on illustrations, not a lot of words. Now the kids are reading the words. They're sounding them out by themselves. They're using their sight words, their high frequency words. So these are intentionally short texts. Kids read by themselves. And chapter books are when they're ready for something a bit longer. And chapter books can range from 2, 3, 4,000 words for the early chapter books up to 10, 12, 15,000 words. So there's a huge range in stories and in text complexity. So those are usually 6 to 10 years old. You know, some kids will read them at 6 and 7. Some kids won't be ready for them till 8 or 9. Then middle grade typically is 8 to 12 years old. So that's still in that age range this person is talking about. And middle grade can be up to 40, 50,000 words. You usually have a much more complex plot than you would for a chapter book. So if you're wanting to write for 6 to 10-year-olds, what you really need to do first is you need to go to the bookstore and hang out for a long time, or go to the library and check out a lot of books. And check out some early readers, check out some chapter books, check out some middle grade, and start going through them. And think about the story that you want to write and where does it align? Which one of these does it fall into? Another thing that I will point out is that chapter books are usually a series of books. You're not just selling one book, you're selling a series. You would just write one book to query or to start self-publishing. But ideally, the idea is that once a kid reads one book in the series, they want to read all of them. So that's another thing to think about. Does your storyline, your story premise, would that work for multiple standalone books like a chapter book series would? So have fun. You got a lot of reading, a lot of researching, a lot of paging through books and thinking about what type of audience do you want to write for. And you also might start writing the book as one and then realize, maybe you start with a chapter book and then you start writing it and you're like, but it's getting a little more complex. It's getting longer. And then maybe you realize it is a middle grade, or maybe you start middle grade and there's not a whole lot of story there and you could simplify it, make it shorter, and maybe it is more of a chapter book. So it's just something that you're going to have to do some research and then have to play with. What are some resources children's book writers should know about? So I have lots in my head. Fingers crossed that I'm going to get to them all. So the first one is the Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. scbwi.org is the website. And it is an international organization for, as it says, writers and illustrators of children's books. And there are resources for those who want to traditionally publish as well as those who want to self-publish. In the last few years, they have joined forces with Ally, the Alliance for Independent Authors, and there's been a lot of new self-publishing resources added that way as well. And it is an international organization, which means that you have access to chapter resources, chapter events all across the world. So if you are in a chapter in the United States, you could take a virtual webinar or travel to an in-person conference somewhere around the United States. But you could also, hop on a plane, and if there's something going on overseas, then you could attend that as well. Obviously, you have to pay for your transportation and your ticket and things like that. But you could, definitely travel or attend virtually to an event that is hosted by another chapter. And then the organization holds in-person events like big national events twice a year in February, usually in New York, and then over the summer in California. They also have resources on their website that you can download that give you information on agents and traditional publishers and kind of helps you understand the publication process and the querying process. The Highlights Foundation, like the Highlights magazines that you used to read when you were a kid, Highlights Foundation offers a combination of in person and virtual writing events. And they're leaning more towards in person these days, but they do offer some virtual events for writers as well. And the in person events are at their location in Pennsylvania in the United States. And you can find out from them, if you get on their email list, they will email frequently with new classes that have been added and also articles, blog posts, things like that about writing books for kids. The Writing Barn I already mentioned in a previous question, but I'm going to mention it again because they have, 1 2 hour webinars that you can sign up for. They have some classes that last 4 6 weeks where you would meet once a week for a few hours, delving into a specific type of book or a specific topic. They also have a program through the Writing Barn called the Courage to Create, which is a monthly membership program now. It just changed from an annual, but you can join in every month. And it's a big writing community, but it also gives you access to interviews with with acquiring agents with agents and acquiring editors from different publishing houses, and it gives you opportunities for submission opportunities. So that is something that you might be interested in if you are interested in traditionally publishing, or also if you are wanting to self-publish, but you just want a writers community and you want to continue to learn more about writing craft, because it's not just all about getting the query and getting the deal. It is also about just growing as a writer. Online, you can find lots of information on the Kidlit 411 page. They have a website. You can sign up for their email list, and then every week they email you the new articles that they have. They always have lots of resources. They also have a robust Facebook group, also called Kidlit 411. So you could find out a lot of information there. It is it tends more to be about traditionally publishing than self-publishing. There are some self-publishing questions that are on there, but it is more traditionally publishing based. Um, if you of course there are tons of Facebook groups about everything out there. The big one for self-publishing would be, I think it's called Children's Book Writers, Authors, and Illustrators. And so that would be a good one, especially if you're going to self-publish. If you are a picture book writer, whether traditional or self-publishing, another good resource is the 12 by 12 challenge. If you Google it, it's going to be 12x12 as if you were giving dimensions. But really what it stands for is writing 12 picture book drafts in 12 months. And it is an annual membership run by Julie Headland. I talked about her earlier. And it's a Facebook community. It's a on their own website community. There's a lot of things with the paid membership. Even if you are not a member of it, they do have on their website links of monthly articles on how somebody got their agent, on how somebody's book got published, and different resources on that. Obviously, you will get more if you have a paid membership, but there is definitely some good information just on the free website as well. Um, Another resource, this is not just for children's book writers, but if you are interested in writing in general, and I'm assuming you are since you are here, the Women in Publishing Summit is every spring, every March. And so that is a good community to get plugged into as well. You will find lots of different sessions for writers of all kinds, lots of networking sessions as well, so you can connect with other writers. And it is another great resource. I also have links to these resources that I talked about, as well as lots more things on my website. So if you want to learn more about writing Kidlit, you can check out the resources and the different editorial and coaching services that I offer on my website. And it is jenavarre.com. So jenavarre.com. I enjoyed talking with you today and would love to hear from you. Thanks.